Hello and welcome to another video. I am today doing a video I am very happy to finally have done. Um, it is a reference to Fallout, the original Fallout's opening. We're going to be covering it and the history kind of in telling it. I do have my notes, that's why I'm kind of looking to the side here. So if you catch me looking to the side, that's what I'm looking at. I don't have that kind of memory. All right. Um, but yeah, Fallout opening. I guess what we're going to go ahead and do is I will play the original Fallout and kind of go over the history a bit as it's playing to give you an example of um, what's happening. Well, we'll talk about the story behind it as it's played, I guess. Anyway, um, Fallout is a very post World War II inspired um, kind of game. It's a lot of 50s nostalgia and feeling with the music, um, the story, the design. You can see it later, especially in later games. But um, for example, in this one, you have the ink spots um, with their song Maybe. Maybe. Yeah, so they originally wanted I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire. That, of course, did not happen, but it did show up later in Fallout 3. Um, but to get to a little bit of history of Fallout, it was released in 1997 by Interplay Studios, not Black Isle. Many of the people that would be Black Isle Studios worked on it, and Black Isle would work on Fallout 2. But there is often a mistake. A lot of people want to say Black Isle produced the first one. No. Many of the people that were in Black Isle worked on it, but they weren't yet Black Isle Studios. They were still just Interplay, not a division of Interplay. So, got to make that clear. Um, the game Interplay itself was under Brian Fargo, and um, he would eventually have to leave Interplay. He would form a different studio, taking with him a game called Wasteland, which was the spiritual predecessor of Fallout. And in all honesty, Fallout was meant as a sequel to Wasteland. Didn't quite work out that way. Yeah, but it became its own intellectual property with a huge fan base of its own, even bigger than Wasteland. Wasteland has since had a second game. I think it was supposed to have a third game recently under Fargo's new company. But yeah, Wasteland is kind of similar to Fallout in spirit. So if you want something to check out, that's a thought. Let's see. But yeah, a lot of 1950s Americana, a lot of post-war feel with the Stealth Boys um, as a item you can pick up and other items. So a lot of sci-fi and culture from the 1950s. It's just there to be very post-war. So, with that, let's talk about the opening. Early in the video, it talks about the Interplay logo. It has, by Interplay Entertainment. And then you have by uh, presented by Brian Fargo, Fallout. From there, we'll go into the topic. The first thing you get is an introduction into the vaults and Vault Boy. Vaults happened. They weren't the big project that we think they were. They were usually a more well-handled situation for smaller populations, who, like a family would build their own, or a company would build their own. There was a vault, I think it was in West Virginia for the presidency, under the Greenbrier Hotel. There's a vault for the world's flora in one of the Scandinavian countries. I don't want to get it wrong, so I'll just say Scandinavian countries up there. Denmark, Finland, Sweden, that area. I'm not sure which one, but it's one of them. Let's see. Vault 13 itself, as far as its locations, and I took a while to research this up on Google Maps to see where it's located, but Vault 13, according to the Fallout Wiki, is under Mount Whitney in California. So, if you want to have an idea of exactly where it's located, it's under Mount Whitney, which you can see is kind of southeast of Mariposa, kind of like in the game. The actual map stretches from up north, that area there, Mariposa, Mount Whitney, down south to just below Los Angeles, but before you get to San Diego. So, because the Boneyard is supposed to be, oh goodness, the Boneyard is supposed to be Los Angeles. I'm not sure how far east it goes, so I don't know exactly where the glow is at, if it's just on the outskirts of the greater Los Angeles area or not. But then Bakersfield, California is, oh God, it's one of the bigger areas. The hub, I think it is. Or it might be, I do think it's the hub. No, Bakersfield is an Acropolis. My fault. Bakersfield is an Acropolis. So you kind of get an idea of where the map sits. So with that in mind, the next thing you'll see in the opening is an advertisement to purchase a vault. In the backgrounds of the advertisements, you'll see nuclear explosions going off. You'll see the mushroom clouds, and you'll kind of see them in the distance. And in the foreground, you have the people lined up going into the mountainside, and in the very foreground, you have this couple just smiling in the 1950s attire. kind of driving home the feel of 1950s Americana post World War II. They are going into a mountainside, Mount Whitney, and it is trying to find my words here. It has just a cutaway of Mount Whitney. Well, we don't even know if that one is Vault 13, but it's a vault. Um, and you also want to remember this is Vault-Tec's public vision of vaults. This is what they want the public to see, because we do know later, if you played the Fallout games, how shady Vault-Tec was and the stuff they got into. But they had a lot of pre-war stuff going on. Anyway, at the very bottom of the screen, you had the Vault-Tec's telephone number, which was a telephone exchange number in use before the common telephone coding system from about the 1920s to the 1950s in the US, being that the front two letters indicate the city. I'm not sure where in California. But usually it indicates the city or area. And then you have the final four, which is the actual number of the um, place you're trying to reach. So, Anaheim might be AN or ANA, your 4 digits. That was your telephone exchange um, information on how to get through to Anaheim to this particular purchase. But again, calls back to that post-war feeling of Americana, because it was quite common in the U.S. for that to be the type of telephone number where we got area code, region code, and number. Anyway, next set of footage that we see is the rocket ship, which is Interplay's logo. Funny enough, because if you've ever watched Interplay's logo, you have that rocket ship going around the planet. It's Galaxy News Network. But anyway, and it's kind of the way you would see it in the older films when they have the news updates. But you have in print how the U.S. is protecting the newly annexed Canada, while you have um, two American soldiers in power armor there executing a Canadian freedom fighter. And I am sorry to Canadians. It's not my fault. It's just an examination of another universe. But yeah, in order to protect the resources in Alaska, because China had invaded Alaska, there was an annexation of Canada, so you could just go whoop instead of having to go whoop. You could just go straight through Canada into Alaska. So it could save time. And it tells you kind of the situation that the world is in. I mean, here you have America taking over a free country, a free and sovereign nation, like Canada. In the Fallout universe, we know that Europe had been like they are now, European Union, except they called themselves the European Commonwealth. But they split apart. They'd been feuding with the Middle East, dropping nuclear bombs on them. And Russia was still an issue. Because, I mean, it was the same feeling of Cold War hysteria, but that transferred to China as it saw its rightful place to take over in the Cold War. So it became an issue between the US and China. China eventually invades Alaska in the Sino-American War um, of the Fallout universe, and it's really because Alaska has some of the last deposits of oil that are easily accessible on Earth. All this over oil. Anyway, I'm getting off topic a bit. Um, so, like I said, execution of the Canadian freedom fighter, um, in an attempt to show American spirit and feelings of protecting the homeland. Now, as this is happening, you have a pullback from the screen. Um, and the next image you see is the close-up of the American soldier in power armor. Behind him that universe's Fallout flag, and you'll notice on the flag you have the one star indicating the U.S. and the 13 Commonwealths. At that time, the U.S. by that point had been divided up into Commonwealths, so you grouped states together in the Commonwealth areas. And so you had 13 Commonwealths around a single star, kind of similar to the original flag, 13 colonies. Although I don't think they had a star in the center, so I think it was just the 13 colonies around. It's kind of interesting how it kind of got back to the beginning, almost. So, but in a way, it's perverted from what it originally was. Um, so after that, we see propaganda buy war bonds, just like in 1940s during the World War II. Buy war bonds. It's that war fever. We need support for the war. But again, they want you to buy war bonds when the next commercial is for Corvega. And one of the things you'll notice is the cost. $199,999.99 for a new car. No. So they want people to pay for the war, but there's skyrocketed inflation. The economy's in horrible shape. Um, and speaking of the Corvega commercial, it's advertising a Corvega by Chrysler, which is clearly a reference to this world's Chrysler and Corvette. There's a lot of there's some insinuation that there's other cars that it's referencing, but these are the clear ones that you can clearly see in the names. So I'm just mentioning them. Um, but The next image you see on the TV as it continues to pull back is for a Mr. Handy, which gives it that post-war Americana sci-fi feel. Very Jetsons like to have a robot housekeeper, you know, kind of that feel. Um, so by now, um, we see the ruins of the old world and the TV. On the bottom of the TV, you'll notice the brand. It's a Radiation King, which is one of the brands of Fallout, especially when it comes to television. Radiation King TVs. And you'll see them in other games. Um, but the TV blinks out, and in the background, you see the ruins, which, from the information I was able to dig up, it's supposed to be a Bakersfield or the Necropolis. So that's what you're seeing in the background. Um, let's see. Screen goes black, and then the tone of it drops from the ink spots, maybe in the Americana, and it goes into a narration by the great Ron Perlman. I do have to congratulate them on having Ron on the opening. It was a nice touch. Um, but he starts narrating, and during the narration, he in the background you see all these images. You have the first image is of the Reichstag after the fall of Berlin in 1945. The second pick is again of the Reichstag after the fall of Berlin in 1945. The third pick is American troops at the Ludendorff Bridge in 1945. The fourth pick is the bombing of St. Paul's Cathedral during the London Blitz in 1940. The next image is of the sinking of the USS Arizona at Pearl Harbor in 1941. The next image is again of that buy war bonds. So again, you have that fever of buy war bonds, support the war, and that is from 1942. The next image is a picture of the gadget from the Trinity testing in 1945. Um, and it was the first tested nuclear bomb we had. The next image is the detonation of that Trinity gadget in 1945. The location where that happened used to be the United States of America's Air Force at Alamogordo bombing and gunnery range, but it's now called White Sands Missile Range. And the final image you see is the 255th Infantry Regiment, as they are in Waldenburg, and that one's from 1945. So the war itself is a very post-World War II game, but it's comparing itself with World War II by giving you all these images. So it's comparing the Fallout universe's Great War with World War II. But since I don't have it playing right now, I'm going to read out to you the Ron Perlman narration, and we'll kind of go over it as we discuss it a little bit. All right. War never changes. The Romans waged war to gather slaves and wealth. Spain built an empire from its lust for gold and territory. Hitler shaped a battered Germany into an economic superpower. So you have setting the stage um, about how much Romans fought and what they fought for. Spain fought and what they fought for when they built an empire. And even Hitler himself, Germany during World War II, formed an empire from the ashes of World War One. But war never changes. And so this is the theme of Fallout games. You'll notice a lot. War. War never changes. But to continue on, in the 21st century, war was still waged over the resources that could be acquired. Only this time the spoils of war were also its weapons, petroleum and uranium. For the resources, China would invade Alaska, the US would annex Canada, and the European Commonwealth would dissolve into quarreling, bickering nation states, bent on controlling the last remaining resources on Earth. So, this tells you about what happens in the Fallout universe. Um, they go after resources, but it's the resources of war. Oil or petroleum is used for a lot of weapons. Uranium, of course, nuclear weapon. Um, China, it invades Alaska, as we talked about. Because of that, the U.S. annexes Canada. And in Europe, the European Commonwealth kind of just falls apart. But to continue on, in 2077, the storm of war, of World War, had come again. In 2 brief hours, most of the planet was reduced to cinders, and from the ashes of nuclear devastation, a new civilization would struggle to arise. So here you have the Great War, 2 hours, just 2. That's it. A nuclear bombardment. We still don't know who started it. We just remember that in the games we saw missiles coming. We don't know how. We don't know why. We don't know if it was a malfunction or what happened. But in 2 hours, boom, 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 boom. Nuclear destruction. So that weapon of prevention became the weapon of devastation. And then it talks about how from the ashes of all this, like the phoenix, civilization tries to rise again. It fights its way forward. A few were able to reach the relative safety of the large underground vaults. Your family was part of that group uh, that entered Vault 13, imprisoned safely behind the large vault door under a mountain of stone. A generation has lived without knowledge of the outside world. So, during the 2 hours, during, this apocalypse, the vaults filled. People, entered the vaults as they could. And so those people, they're entered, that's it. They know nothing else of what's happened to the outside world. and it brings you into the first game. Your family knows nothing of it because the vault's been closed. And finally, life outside the vault is about to change. And you finish with a picture of the vault closing up and kind of fading out. And that's kind of how the opening of Fallout happens. So you see how much it's connected to uh, the post-nuclear world. So anyway, that's all I have. Always remember, educate thyself, read, study, learn. Knowledge is always a good thing to have. It empowers you. So always search out knowledge. Um, I do want to give special thanks. I'll be listing them in the sources cited at the bottom in the description of the video. But Google Maps, the Fallout game for the opening, so I could analyze it. The Fallout Wiki, and Wikipedia, which were used in analyzing this. So, well, I'll see you for the next video. Y'all have a good one. Later.